Hello, welcome to our second ITXM Summit. Hi Sami.
Hi Pasi.
How are you? So my name is Pasi Nikkanen, one of the co-founders at Happy Signals, and joined to me today is Sami Kallio, our CEO.
Yeah, so we are two founders, very, very excited about this event and even more excited about experience management in IT.
Yeah, so let's do a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. So, this is the second summit, like I said. You can also find the recordings for the January sessions on our website. And all these sessions are available on demand after we end this one. So you will get an email with the links to everything then. And, there's the slides and the recordings and everything, and you can share them with your colleagues as well. And during the sessions, if you have any questions, please write them down. It might be that we might not be able to answer all of them right away, but we are also gathering those questions and then sending out answers afterwards to our participants. And but maybe we'll start looking at what the agenda looks like. So I think we have a great lineup for today. So we'll start the session with Sami about decision making with human-centric IT experience. Then we are joined by Prashant Arora, Director Strategy and Transformation from PepsiCo. What he's talking about is transforming IT and enterprise services with experience management. And that's really about the whole journey, how to get started. He has done it multiple times in different companies, so that's a really interesting session to hear. After that, we have our thought leader, Doc Rabold, Chief Experience Officer of Bold Ray Consulting. And you are joining Sami with Doc to talk about what XLAs are not. And that's an interesting question, because I think, it's still like, what is it then? I kind of know what it is, but do I really know? So this is an interesting topic to go through what they are not.
Yeah, sometimes it's easier to understanding by going the negative side of it, that what is not. So it will be interesting.
Yeah. And after that, we are joined by Aimee Burnham, Global Director of Technology and Operations from Computacenter. And she will be interviewed by our Katie Bates, VP Global Partnership and Alliances. So this is interesting to hear how a global service provider is actually using experience management in their offering.
Yeah, it will be kind of the other way of looking at it from the provider side. And I really wait for that presentation, because I believe it's good for everybody, so providers and customers, to understand it, how it feels from the other side and how they can really develop their services using experience data.
Yeah, and I think the whole experience management is a cooperation thing anyway.
It is.
So if you have outsourced partners, it's very crucial that they also understand the benefit. But you also, as a customer, understand the benefit if your outsourced partner is talking about this.
It's to make it very, very simple. It's that your provider, your IT department, you have a common customer, which is the end users and business of your organization. So experience management makes you work together for better.
Exactly. And then to end the whole session, we have you, Sami, and then Sakari Kyro from our side as well, talking about the global IT benchmark and the key findings from it. And I think on this time, you're a little bit focusing on the industries and then the US perspective of that.
Yeah. So kind of discussing with Sakari, who is our expert on that data, to really understand what are the differences between US compared to the rest of the world. So how people in US feel about IT a bit differently than rest of the world.
And this is really talking about how 5 million people feel about IT services.
Yeah.
So we have a huge database of anonymous benchmarking from IT experience.
Yeah, and there is this focus is the last 6 months focus that we are going to go through in this meeting. So it's a updated information on what people feel.
Cool. But hey, then I think, Sami, it's time to get started with our session first, which is about the decision making with human-centric IT experience.
So let's take us out of the agenda and give the stage for the customers and partners.
Yeah. But hey, I'll give the floor to you. So please go ahead and tell us a little bit about it. Of course, I'll join you with it, but go ahead.
Don't leave me alone. All right. But hey, the main thing what we as an organization do, we are helping IT, both partners and organizations themselves, to really gather the data about how people feel about IT, and is IT really making the end users efficient? And this slide here shows people, process, data, and IT traditionally has been very focused on and very good at collecting data about the processes and technology.
Yeah.
But you need really to understand, are you really creating value with the people data?
Yeah.
And that is the area where we are helping our customers to really gather that insight and really use that in the decision making.
Yeah.
But then I think it's good to start from the perspective that why that data is important. And we started from this frustrated IT leader, because I have met this guy or lady so many times, the IT leader who is talking about the current situation, what happens when they focus only on the people data, only on the tech data and the process data. Why they are frustrated is because of the watermelon. And this is a metaphor, of course.
Yeah.
And what it describes is that if you focus on those technology data and process data, it is relevantly easy to make them green. So everything looks like it's okay. Your servers are up and running. You are answering all tickets in 2 hours or 2 minutes, whatever you have set as your SLAs. And when you meet your providers, they are just showing you those green lights.
Yeah.
But simultaneously, as an IT leader, when you meet the business leaders and the business people, they are then talking about something totally different.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of IT is really good also, creating metrics to follow. And many times also those SLAs and availability things, they are set by IT people.
True.
They are not set by somebody else that you're trying to follow. You are setting them. And in a way, when you outsource it to somebody and you put in an agreement that you have to get this level, they will get that level. But that's probably it. So where is it really leading? And also you can keep yourself very busy. Every morning you can look at this tech data. This is red. We need to do something about it. But does it really have any impact for the people that you probably now talk about next?
Yeah, and that's kind of the other side of that watermelon is the people, that red side. Because if you really don't understand what is important for them, what is making them efficient and so on, you're most likely doing wrong decisions based on that tech data. Because as you have said, if you are just acting on all the red indicators, maybe from the tech data, it might even be that it didn't matter at all for the business users.
Yeah.
But then even though the servers are up and running, the application they are doing might be annoying them after day, and every hour they are losing a bit of time because the interface or the service itself is just so badly designed.
Yeah, and it could be this end-to-end experience that is bad. It's the combination of things.
Yeah.
And then if you divide the responsibilities in the IT team, that you're responsible of the application, you're responsible of the laptop, then who is thinking about the whole experience when you're trying to get your work done? Yeah. That you actually need to use this device through that network to access that thing, and that combo doesn't really work.
Yeah, and it's in all organizations, and even the bigger the organization is, that variety of roles in your organization is quite a big one.
Yeah.
And then you have to separately understand how the people in factories or shops, retail shops, are feeling about the service compared to the headquartered people.
Yeah.
And they have different needs.
Yeah.
And if IT tries to kind of understand everybody in the same level and not understand its specific needs, then you cannot do the services in a way that the people feel good about it.
Yeah. And I think when the employees are actually frustrated, it actually then leads into how the business, the CFO and the HR are seeing IT. So the reputation of IT starts to be the thing that actually is the symptom out of all of this. Business is saying that you're not enabling business. CFO is saying that you need to drive, productivity and avoid costs, because it comes cost avoidance that, okay, let's not try to spend too much money since you're not really bringing anything to the table. And then HR is that, hey, there is this employee experience that you are now, after COVID and after everything, you are so much part of that. How do you actually contribute to that?
And I think that is the kind of that frustrated IT leader. It is exactly what you're now talking about. That is the feeling what they are having, that how can I lead my teams in a way that they understand the value side of life?
Yeah.
And they are not just showing me the green lights that everything is okay. And I'm there between the business shouting to my left ear that everything is crap. You should be doing this. And then you are trying to communicate that to teams. And it's kind of a very challenging situation. And the reputation of IT is the real thing that is bothering people and taking their work motivation away.
Yeah.
Because if you, as an IT worker, leader or worker, if you're doing something in a way that you know that should be doing this differently, but you are just focusing on the metrics to meet them because of maybe sanctions in the agreements or just your KPIs in IT. So you prioritize your own way of working, not the value what you are creating.
And I think that for the IT leaders, then leading the whole IT department, because then you have specialists in their own fields and they are so good at understanding the tech data and the process, why that is. But how do you give them a common metric, a common thing to follow? And that's where this thing comes from, that you need to have something to give them. Like, what do you do when you wake up at your home office tomorrow? What is the thing that you follow? Are you just looking at some metrics somewhere and then the next team is looking at other metrics, and then, you know, as a CIO, you not really understand what is happening in the whole IT department.
So and I think that is the kind of the key thing that changes when you start to work in a human-centric way. You then have that North Star metric, which we recommend to be the feeling, the happiness of end users, the satisfaction of end users, do any of the IT services, but also the productivity. So you need them both. And that is the thing what we help our customers to do, to measure how people felt, where they are losing time and so on. Because that changes how you can communicate the values to the business and really understand what is important for the business, and then how you lead your teams. But let's deep dive to this one a bit. So that
maybe talk still about the happiness and productivity. I think this is the old metaphor, this scale metaphor that comes from external customer experience. When you're externally with the customers, you try to make them experience good enough that they would spend more money into your product and services. Internally, employees don't have a choice. They are not buying your services, but they are still consuming your services. So to understand how to balance so that you are not putting too much, because you don't have limited budget. You're not trying to put all your money, or like ask always more money, but you're trying to balance. How do we balance that the productivity is good and they are happy enough with the services, so that there are not like these outliers that they are really hating and losing time, but you're trying to fix those really the bad spots in the thing. But let's see how it is.
This is now about 2 years ago that Adobe released a report where they said that 48% of people leaving organizations partly did that because of bad IT services. And that is a huge percentage. And that's why kind of this, even though you said it in consumer words, it's about how much money they spend. But employees are not anymore satisfied with whatever level of IT. You really have to be better and better. And for sure, the new generations are even more demanding than our generation. We used to do very bad IT.
We are still young.
Let's play that game. But anyway, this is the kind of the whole thing. How can IT then lead, first of all, the teams better? And this is really a big thing. Because when you have now the understanding of different services, how different kind of people felt about the IT, then you can give more autonomy to the teams, your partners, your own teams, that, hey, this is the metric. So just start from the experience and the lost time of people and focus on those things where those are problems. Then take the tech data and process data to understand maybe what is going on. So people, process, tech in that order makes the life much more efficient for IT, because then you are using your efforts, your money, the things that matter. Because there is no IT team or IT department that would have unlimited IT budget. So you always have to spend the money for the things that matter. And that comes from the people, the users. It doesn't come from tech.
And looking from this picture, like if you have this kind of experience data available and you can break it down into your operational data, you can see that the big volume of people in UK are like wasting time on CRM. As a global company, you might not even ever visit that offices. You might not even talk to those people. How can you understand that? Then you see here, and then people are saying that CRM is frustrating and makes me less productive. IT people are really good at solving problems when you give them the real problem to solve. And this really, like you said, enables, the use of experience data, identify where the people are really frustrated and struggling. Yeah.
And that is then the thing is that then your people, your teams, your partners can create more value. What is important here is that it even feels better.
Yes.
So some people first, they are a bit like hesitant or even scared about the people data, the experience data, that can we really influence it. But if you really think about it another way, yes, you can. And on the other hand, it's much more motivating for IT because meeting those SLAs, and I love to use, and I have done this so many times in different webinars and events, that very easy example is you think about the service desk agent.
Yeah.
So the experience data is important from the CIO level down to every IT people. But service desk agent, answering phone calls, emails, whatever chats from people who are frustrated, have some problems. And if you use the traditional SLAs, you are measuring how fast they get rid of their customers. So how many tickets they close per hour. That motivation is not really great. You are there to meet the metrics.
Yeah.
But when you start to measure experience and you give that data back to the agent, you start to measure them how they help people. And for most of us people, that is much more motivating than the kind of traditional metrics.
Yeah, and I think a metaphor from another industry, to think about hospitals. Like if a hospital is being measured, how many patients get out every day?
Yeah.
When actually what you maybe as a doctor would like to measure is how many patients did we cure today. And that's the difference here. So really getting and the way that we measure now the thing, like you can see here that, hey, happiness increased, but also productivity increased.
Yeah.
And the way that it does is that if you ask from the end users how much time you are wasting somewhere, and then you make an improvement and you're actually able to change the perception of those end users that after 2 months they say that they are losing less time.
They are more efficient.
That's a very motivating metric, that if you, let's say you improve some process by 5 seconds, so what? You improved restart time of the laptop by 30 seconds. So what? I still always get my coffee when I put my laptop on. It's not a meaningful thing for me. But actually, as a finance person, at the end of the month, now the tool works. I can get my stuff done on time. Now I'm happy. Now I get my work done. I'm not just complaining to be complained. This is sometimes difficult for IT people to understand, that people are just complaining. But no, they are trying to get their work done. And when you help them, the feeling that you get out of that is
something
enormous.
that you should understand. Yeah. And that's the kind of and then when you start to think about this whole thing from the business perspective, you can be, as an IT director, you can be more proactive. Of course, measuring experiences after they have happened kind of is reactive, but no. When you now go to meet the, let's say, sales director of the organization, and you have measured all the different areas of IT, from tickets to remote working and applications, you go there and show to the business director, hey, you have your 1,000 employees globally.
Yeah.
They hate this service. They love this one. These are the ways. And that's why we would recommend that together we focus on improving the experience in here and the efficiency in these services.
Yeah.
So you can really create more value, and you can show to the business that, hey, these are things that matter your people. You're not only going there to ask what is important for you, because that is something we have heard from so many customers. That there was one US customer, for example, that told us a story that one director from the business was complaining about one application and really, really saying that it's so crap. IT did a budget of improving that, but simultaneously they start to measure 20 applications with our tool in that organization. And they found out that application, in fact, was about the most loved application. But there were several applications that were not on a good level. So they were able to go back to that director, sorry, we will cancel the improvement of that application. We are spending that money for these applications that matter more to your people. And that kind of really is a great example of how the experience data helps IT to do better decisions, because you understand all the people, not only what the directors are saying. And those directors will listen to you when you have proof. I think these are things that we have done. This is how we are improving. And these are the next steps.
Yeah.
So it's and for sure, it feels much better for you as an IT director to be able to deliver that kind of service.
Exactly. And like in this example, so, there was this CRM thing that was shown in the data. And now you can show that, look, that CRM is now fixed, but actually we also identified already that the VPN should be the next thing to do. Yeah. So you already have understanding that where to go next, and you can then make decisions in the IT management team or whatever IT leadership team you are presenting that, and do it based on a data, based on a metric that everybody understands and everybody can follow. Yeah.
And so I have had so many discussions with different CIOs of organizations about how it feels before our product to meet business when they are just saying your services are crap, you are doing bad job.
Yeah.
And they are like, I cannot defend myself or the team because the reports I have are 1 year old or 1 month old from the survey we did, one-time survey. And that's why kind of having all this information at your hand as a line director on daily basis.
Yeah.
The CIO of company said once that for him, our tool is the same thing that CRM is for sales director.
Yeah.
He said, every day I open it first to check how we are doing. And that is really kind of the mindset. Okay, they were quite advanced customer. It's quite advanced customer. So they are using it in a good level. Yeah. And that was not after 1 week of using the tool, it's a journey that you learn to do stuff.
Yeah, but we also heard this that the CFOs have been thank you for bringing this, and some of our champions, they got a handwritten letter from the CIO that thank you for bringing experience management into our organization, because now the perception of IT in the C-level has totally transformed. Yeah.
Yeah, that is the very, very positive thing about this.
Yeah. But then what does this all lead to? Yeah, we have people have some numbers and some outcomes of what usually happens when you start the journey and you start making things.
So this slide here is based on a survey we did to our customer base. So these are the organizations that are really focused on experience management. But we asked them, what are the biggest benefits that you have gotten in your organization from experience management and focus on human-centric IT? Okay, happier end user is quite a obvious one.
Yeah.
But I would now on this slide, if you look at it, lift your focus to the things like more motivated IT employees. 64%. And that is really changing your culture inside IT.
Mm.
And if people are more motivated, for sure they get better results.
Yeah.
And that's why they can do their autonomous decisions and so on. So that's the kind of the big thing in the IT experience management, that it's not a soft thing, it's a leadership thing.
Yeah, and I think the second and third as well, the better focus and IT can make better decisions. Exactly what we were just discussing, that just highlights from the survey from our customers that's what they actually get.
But also we have checked from the data, because we are collecting experience data on continuous basis, that on average our customers, after using our product 1 year, their employees are 26% more productive.
Yeah.
And this now number is related to the IT tickets.
Yeah.
But really making it easier to use IT support, making it easier to really get things solved.
Yep.
And that efficiency really is a big thing. That in minutes means 45 minutes per ticket.
Yeah. Yep.
And that really gives some time back to the business.
Yeah.
But I think now let's start to give the floor for Praveen, that he can really Prashant, sorry.
Yeah.
Praveen is our own employee, and my words go a bit wrong here. But he will talk about the journey in the experience management. So what we have been now discussing with Pasi is maybe something that typically we see our customers to be in that level in about a year or 2 years.
Mm.
So you cannot jump from not having the data to really be IT in the IT-centric culture.
Yeah.
Human-centric culture in a few months.
Yeah, I think sometimes, IT is so distant. Hey, we heard something about XLAs. We want to get XLAs in. And then you start like, well, do you have experience data? No. Do you have ways of working around that experience data? No. Well, then you can't. It's very easy to get first data and tooling in place. Then you can slowly start rolling out the ways of working. And when everybody's comfortable with that, because this is a change. It's a change for people. It's a new thing. You need to do it step by step. And I think like Prashant, you always say, is like, go slow to go fast. Yeah. And that's really is the key, that to actually then get easily into the XLAs and these productivity gains and into the human-centric culture, just start start small, start
Okay.
making examples, show to people how it's being done, and then you'll end up there. But yeah, basically, to start thinking about how to start your journey, the next session that we will have is transforming IT, but also enterprise services. We have been now just talking about IT, but all these relate to your enterprise service management as well. So Prashant and Mark Buick, they will talk about how to do this journey.
So I'm joined here today by Prashant Arora, Director of Strategy and Transformation at PepsiCo, where we're going to be talking about transforming IT enterprise services with experience management. My name is Mark Buick. I'm the Senior ITXM Advisor at Happy Signals, and I help people on their journees for adopting ITXM. So welcome, Prashant. Thank you for joining us.
Great. I'll quickly introduce myself as well. I'm Prashant Arora. I work for PepsiCo, and within my remit, I own the global service desk and the entire digital experience for the company, and a lot of products and service related aspects is what falls within my remit.
Okay, excellent stuff. So let's start going through the conversation we're going to have then around global coverage of ITXM from your experience with many companies now doing this in. So very interested to hear the stories from large companies to super large companies and how the differences might be between those organizations as you try and roll out ITXM.
Yeah. No, thanks, Mark. So this experience, I'll repeat. No, thanks, Mark. So this experience has always been very enriching, right? So many companies I've worked for so far, and everywhere we have a kind of similar way to manage these services, right? The good age-old ITIL practices still live in many companies. The large companies are much more streamlined in terms of typical ITIL 101. But often, what gets missed is the experience. What matters the most to the employees, to the end users, that often gets missed, right? And think about SLAs and all the metrics and KPIs. Those are all IT-centric. I think those are great, designed for your support teams, your partners, your own IT stakeholders, but not necessarily they always fit the bill for the employees, for their experiences. So yeah, well, I look forward to the conversation. That's what we'll be talking today.
Excellent. No, it's going to be really interesting because it's been this way for so long, right? In terms of the ITIL metrics and KPIs and the way we work. And it's now taking every event we go to nowadays talks about experience, and there's some dedicated to XLAs and experience management. So it's really exciting times. And we're certainly seeing some of the much bigger organizations now taking this on, including managed service providers now. So it's an excellent time at the moment.
Exactly.
Over to you for your material. Thank you.
Yeah, no. So one of the things which we often talk about, and many companies I think now do it right in a way or form, is listening to their employees' service experience, right? So when I say service experience, you close a ticket, be it an incident or a request, and what's our experience? How did we do, right? And I think every company I've worked for, known, they all have one or the other survey mechanism, right? So they reach out. Some companies still have a classic old 10 questions, 20 questions long survey. Some companies keep it really light and short. And that's great, right? That gives you a lot of data. If you have a great team behind, they can analyze the data and continue to improve services. But I still don't think that's enough, right? Because think about it. We as an employee, we don't just always touch the service side of the IT, right? So IT is a massive function in any large or ultra large companies, as we talk about, right? And there could be multiple touch points, right? Service is just one touch point. You close the ticket, you capture the experience or the how did we do kind of survey, and that's just one, right? We really need to see that what are the other channels through which people get there, right? So there is a metric, I don't know if you remember, the average effort score. How much time, how much effort does it require for a person to get to support services, right? And how do we get there? Portal, mobile app. Well, today we have chatbots, we have smart IVRs, right? And I'm sure each one of us have experienced some clunky IVR where you press 1 for this and press 20 for something and press 99 for
and then
something.
it disconnects. Yeah.
And then it disconnects, right? While the service was great, the person was just perfect. They resolved my ticket or my issue within minutes. But to get to that person, well, it took me 9 minutes.
Yeah.
That defeats the whole purpose.
Yeah.
That loses the intent of your experience, right? So I'm a big promoter where I believe that we need to capture experience across all the touch points when you go to services, right?
Absolutely.
So think about some users, Gen Zs, they often use chat or chatbots.
Mm-hmm.
What's their experience? People who are always on the move, they use mobile app. What's their experience?
Mm-hmm.
People who are still classic baby bloomers, they would like to go for the phone calls. What's their experience? And so on and so forth, right?
Yep.
So that's what I believe. And once you have that very rich data, then what's the backend process to really process that data and make improvements, right? Which really are for the employees, right? And not just for the stakeholders. The stakeholders may have a perception about services, but what does really an employee want when they reach out to IT services through these touch points? So that's what I would think through this.
Excellent. No, that makes sense. Absolute sense to me. And I think I would agree with you. It's sometimes the companies can go along, the organizations go along the line of one size fits all. I had one customer many moons ago whose idea was to let's get rid of the service desk, but they had an enormous number of temporary seasonal workers that came in, and using the chatbot for them wouldn't have been possible. So they had to, in the end, keep their service desk because of that reason. They hadn't considered all of the different areas of their employee base. So very interesting way of looking at things.
Exactly. And then think about it. This is just a service, right? Within services side, you have multiple touch points now, right? And if you zoom out, again, looking from a big, large, ultra large company's point of view, even services is just one touch point, right? Mm-hmm. So think of you as a person from finance or HR or procurement or legal or any of these business units, right? You have multiple touch points with IT as a whole. Service is just one, right? So we often work with IT. Let's say if I'm somebody from HR or from sales, I work with IT, obviously for my day-to-day support services, but I also work with IT on their various projects. Maybe I'm doing a sales project and I need IT's help. Maybe I'm doing a new HR project and I need IT's help, right? And then think about all the tools and applications that we use. Well, they are coming from IT, right? And well, they work fantastically. I never need the support, and hence I will not touch the support service experience side. But what about the tool and the application experience, right? Is the application good enough? People use Zoom, Teams, Slack, and whatnot, right? Are they good enough, right? Is that what really helps me do my work faster, better? Or they kind of add more cycle time to my day-to-day work, right? So that's another touch point, if you really see, right? Tons of application we use, Concur and HRMS systems, and I'm sure every company has tons of applications.
And things,
exactly, right? And then laptops and desktops. So if you really look at all these three touch points, one, I call it as a digital gateway to IT support, because IT support is not just straightforward. Now you have a whole digital ecosystem, which we talked about, right? Then we have all the projects that IT department is doing for other departments, right? And that's another touch point. And the third touch point is the productivity tools, the applications, enterprise class applications, the communication, collaboration applications, and so on. So the real experience culture can be built when you adequately cover all three touch points and drive experience in the right direction.
Across the board. Yes, I think historically, CSAT has always been a measure that lots of organizations have used. And it wasn't always on every touch point as well, right?
Exactly.
Serbia's CSAT score or survey every 6 tickets or whatever it might be. But the rest of it was left to almost the annual survey to find out how, and then it was a really broad question around how do you feel about IT? And that was it, right? There was nothing else, no context. It was just a number, right? So I think, I agree with you. All those different touch points are equally valuable. I remember in the past, I joined an organization where it took 6 weeks to get a laptop. And honestly, by this point, I was so frustrated. I was ready to walk from that organization. So So it makes a big difference, and it is a very important touch point. You're not effective if you can't even start, right? You can't even turn your machine on. There's no machine to turn on. So yeah, I agree with you. There's very valid touch points everywhere.
And I'm guessing that if it took you 6 weeks to get a laptop, I'm sure this survey, the very one survey called "How's your experience with IT," must have come at the end of the year.
Well, I'd left the company within that year, so I didn't even get the survey. So yes, it is.
Right.
But it would have been awesome had I got one, right? To say your laptop's turned up, how do you feel?
Yeah.
And I could have said, well, actually, I wasn't very productive for 6 weeks. That would have been a very interesting story. And then hopefully someone would have picked that up. But that's the next part of the equation, isn't it? Using that information, not just asking for it. Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. And several big companies I've worked for so far in my career, right? So one of the things which I'm a big promoter of, driving the day one experience, right? And I feel like I'm so reactive now because you know what? Today for the Gen Z, and I don't know what's the next letter for Gen, but for them it's no longer day one. It's a day zero experience. You know what? It's not just day zero. It's day minus N experience.
Yeah.
Because they start engaging with their to-be company way earlier.
Yeah.
Right when they get the offer and they made their mind, I'm going to join in.
Yeah.
From then they start engaging with your social pages, with your tools in some cases, with your people in some cases, those warm-up calls and everything, right? So yeah, that's how it is. And again, it's just one aspect that you brought in, right? You got a laptop and, how's the experience and all that. Similarly, every employee, if you see, they have a multiple moments that matter.
Yep.
Right? As a new joiner, getting a laptop is a moment that matter to you.
Yeah.
Right? As a person who is exiting the company, there are moments that matter to you.
Yes.
You are emotionally attached or detached from the company, but still it's a moment, right? So if you think from IT perspective, all the day-to-day interactions across the touch points we talked about, every touch point has some moments that matter to you as an employee, right? And I believe that each of those moments worth capturing the experience, right?
Absolutely.
If you can wow those employees in every moment that matter to them, well, that's the world-class, delightful experience looks like, right?
Yes.
So, and think about it from IT services standpoint, browsing a portal. Well, you have a clunky portal and there is a moment when you need to get an IT ticket out right away and you are still navigating. Oh my God, which catalog item, which category? Hang on a minute, not generic, standard, right? So that's not the right one, right? Looking for a knowledge article and you have zillions of them and not necessarily all great, right?
Yeah.
So these are various moments that matter to you, right? You're trying to escalate an existing ticket and the escalation procedure takes forever, right? So these moments are worth capturing the experience and they give you loads of meaningful insights at how you can further drive experience in everything you do day to day for your employees.
Yeah, and then it's the general hygiene, isn't it? It's which battle do you pick to fight, right?
Yeah.
Which one do you go for first? And a lot of organizations obviously start with the instance requests in terms of the happiness of employees.
Yeah.
Productivity sort of comes somewhere along the line later on. And then we start looking at the proactive spaces, overall IT, laptops and computers and what have you. In your experience, do you think that's the best way forward, to start with one and leave the rest till later? Or do you think it's best to just jump in there and get information coming in that you can try and map together somehow? For example, if ticket-based responses showing a really dreadful experience, and then in the overall IT experience one, you can find out that it's because of training or whatever, how do you try and prioritize those things in an organization such as the ones you've worked in, the big organizations? Yeah,
no, that's a great question, right? So, so I don't think there is a way or there is a right or wrong answer to it, right? So I'll give you a couple of scenarios. There are companies where we knew exactly where we are going wrong as an IT department or as a retained IT, if you like, right? So we were extremely outsourced. We had a great partner. They were tackling our services. Everything was green, as we call them, the watermelon. But obviously we were missing the mark, right? And then we keep hearing them from our stakeholders, from people we work day to day within our own company, that they're not quite happy with the services, right? Well, numbers show very different, right?
Yeah.
So if that's the case, where we were some time ago in one of my previous organizations, obviously you're going to prioritize those services. And yes, you're right, those were incidents and requests and then associated moments that matter, right? And there are other companies I've worked for or working. The approach is slightly different. So it depends what's your overarching strategy, right? So if experience is the priority, I think then you have a huge leeway to kind of get things going. And then you might start with the IT tickets, or even you might start with non-IT tickets, right?
Yeah.
So things are moving today in the industry. I'm sure people are moving more towards enterprise service management. Right?
Yes.
So employees don't really see us as in, oh, you know what, for IT go here, and for HR go there, and for financial services go there, right?
Yes.
For them, it's a one-stop shop.
Yeah.
Right?
I want something. I need something.
I need something.
Yeah.
That's all, right? Sometimes that something could be, reserve a desk for me because I'm planning to visit the office, or sometime, replace my laptop, or sometime, fix my payslip because it has a wrong number, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
So if that's your priority, if that's where you are headed, and you are already matured in your IT service management space, I would say we move towards the enterprise service management space.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And I consider experience management as a horizontal, right? So it's not just IT experience and non-IT experience and HR experience and procurement, and now it's an experience management.
It's just experience.
Exactly,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it would be so nice if you really tie it back with your HR experience, the Pulse surveys and Great Place to Work surveys that HR do.
Yeah.
If you can really tie that with with these, if you can also tie that with the digital experience of employees, right?
Through the DEX tools and what
exactly,
have you.
For the DEX tools and metrics, right? Then that makes this a really good full package, right?
It becomes really, certainly when you combine it with DEX tools, it's very powerful, isn't it? Because if many organizations look at the DEX value, it scores a laptop 8 or whatever it might be. And that's all well and good. However, the laptop weighs 16 kilos, or exaggeration, 5 kilos, 6 kilos, it's just too heavy, or the screen's too small. No DEX tool can tell you this. So it's layering on top the employee data, their feedback on top of the technical data and operational data to make things better.
Exactly. Right. Yep. So, and again, it's a great question, right? And considering these things, we put together this little visual, right? So no matter which company you work for, right? It could be a small company, or a mid-size, or large, or ultra large, as we call them. I think the fundamentals don't change. What changes the complexity, the scale.
Yes.
Really, right? The time to value might change depending on how mature you are, but fundamentals don't change, right? So a classic journey, which you kind of put together, is partner-led service delivery, where you have partners. Partners could be internal, your support teams, or could be external. You have outsourced or co-sourced, right? Traditional ITL model is where everybody starts, right? And I've also seen, even today, some companies still do not have a very well matured ITL practices, right? Well, despite of it's being 30 years old.
Yes, exactly. Right? It's a little bit old now, isn't it?
but that's where typically people start, and then obviously they swing to CSAT mechanism, as I said, 10 questions to 20 questions to 100 questions.
Yes,
and then obviously they pivot to NPS based experience or the service measurements, right? And that's really get them thinking that, hey, this is probably the better way and simpler way, and it gets everything what you need to fix your services or elevate your services without putting the survey fatigue to your users, right? And that's where you start thinking through, how do I really stitch my existing CSAT to NPS and stitch that to your partners and their contracts and so on, right? Essentially what we are looking there is driving services beyond the SLAs, a more modern experience-led approach, right?
And have you found challenges with that, with certainly external service providers, where they're not that keen on adopting something that can't be seen in a ticket? Do you know what I mean? Such as a start time and an end time. Something that they can't drive, the numbers can't be calculated easily in that respect. How do we feel about that?
Great questions, and it comes all the time, right? So, and you're right. See, again, it's a cultural change, right? ITL and best ticketing practices, great tool vendors like ServiceNow and BMC and whatnot, they have always shown that side of the thing to the world, right? That you have a start date, start time, end date, end time, subtract the elapsed time, and then that's you have, right? But then, not, as I said, those are fit for IT and IT stakeholders, not necessarily for the employees, for the real end users, right? So you're right, it's a cultural change. Not necessarily every partner will be very keen towards it, but it depends. You as a client, or you as a experience owner, I would put it that way, right? Because I'm sure the listeners would be from companies where they have internal IT, right? So you as a chief advocate of experience, what do you think should be the focus? If your focus is experience, if your focus is happiness, you will look at the SLAs once in a while maybe, but then the first slide of every weekly or monthly review would start with the NPS data. Right?
Absolutely.
And that starts driving the culture, right? Good, bad, ugly, put it out there. Let people see it, feel it, and have those conversations going, right? And that slowly and gradually drives the cultural change, right?
Yeah, and there's I agree with you, by the way, and there's parts of it around the traditional SLAs and KPIs that can be made more human as well.
Yeah.
For example, the golden one we talked about was the start time and end time of a ticket, but in the middle of it, you've got this enormous hold time.
Oh, yeah.
So just removing that hold time suddenly changes the whole thought around a ticket.
Yeah.
So, for example, you might, when you have that hold time included, have 30% of your tickets resolved within 24 hours.
Yeah.
But if you then try and say, okay, let's remove that hold time, it changes drastically. And you're trying to get it to sort of 100% of tickets within 24 hours or 95% or 80%, whatever it might be. But it's really tough. It's really tough because there's lots of elements that can stop that, such as the employee not being available. But making those traditional SLAs and the more ITIL-based things like KPIs and what have you, more human-centric could be another lever into moving towards the XLA and experience side of things as opposed to just bringing another number out, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And I can't resist to share this example, right? So we, just like another company, used to measure this start time and end time, right? And yes, we thought about, hey, you know what, take off the whole time and let's look at the numbers. Well, and then we started reducing the numbers. 6 months, 8 months, a year later, still the NPS didn't improve.
No.
You know why? Because we never knew that employees are not really bothered about whole time or ticket time. There was something else bothering them. That came to us through the verbatims, exact comments that people talk about. And you know what that was? It was, well, from ticket to start to end, your services were great. Yes, it took you a little longer. You put my ticket on hold, but I'm okay with that. What I'm not okay is it took me 7 days to get an approval. Well, service requests don't start until you have an approval.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So 7 days, 10 days to get approval, and then 3 days to resolve. Right? And then we were reducing 3 days to 1 day. Still, it didn't fit the bill because 7 day, 10 day, we never changed.
No, it's exactly right. In my former role, when I was head of service management in another organization, you'd often find tickets that could have taken 3 weeks to resolve, instance, for example, or requests that actually scored really highly from the employee's perspective. They were happy with it because communication was really good.
Yeah.
And actually, when it come to it, you did fix it first time, or you gave me what I wanted as opposed to something I didn't want. So those three elements of communication, accuracy, and speed, probably in that order, are probably more important than the speed alone.
Fully agree.
Yeah, but I think still considering taking those things out of those traditional SLAs is helpful in driving that mindset change. That actually, it's a really bad thing, generally speaking, to have hold time. Generally speaking, no one really benefits other than the IT team, right? In the end,
exactly. Right. And again, that's how the contracts are written.
Exactly.
That's how companies protect each other. And it has a place, it has a reason, but not necessarily it's a user-centric reason.
Exactly. It's not that. Yeah, I agree.
So that's the journey, right? And then if you keep looking forward towards the journey, then you have productivity tools, as we talked about, right? Capturing those experience, really bringing a consistent consumer-grade experience at work, right? So think about it. In our day-to-day, beyond the work, what apps do we use? We use Amazon, we use Facebook, we use LinkedIn, we use all
Netflix
those
and
Netflix and whatnot, right? I don't think any of these apps have a clunky, poor user experience.
They don't fail, right? I can't remember the last time that Netflix failed on me, for example.
Exactly. And if they fail, they make the news. They are trending on Twitter like in no time. Well, X now, not Twitter anymore. But
no, it's a big thing.
But right? So when employees or when people, forget employees, when people are so used to of this consumer grade experience in their personal life, why don't they get this experience when they're come in the office, right? When they work with office enterprise applications, they must get this similar experience, right?
And do we think that's more difficult for older companies than the more modern ones that go straight to a cloud-based, SaaS-based solution, right? Where you might have a history. Former company I worked for had an instance of SQL that was 20 years old, and had been heavily customized, and that's never going to be a great experience, right? Where you click a button and wait and go for your lunch before it fulfills that order.
Right.
So it's certainly more taxing for those organizations that have got history, the 50-year-old, the 100-year-old companies, to move quickly and change everything they've got. It just costs billions of dollars to do, right?
It does. It absolutely does. But if you can't change that for the reasons you stated, right, at least you can invest elsewhere. For example, make sure the employees understand why it is the case and train them, enable them, right?
Yeah.
So change is all about winning their head, their heart, and their hands.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, if your head, if they're clear why they can't change it, why my experience has to be a little clunky, heart, they know my company has a heart to change it, and then you enable their hands so that they can still be more productive while dealing with these not so great apps.
Yeah.
It can really change their perception towards IT or even non-IT, right? So that's the next wave, I would say. Then comes the laptop and desktops. We talk about that, right? So we spend a lot of time on these things if you are a knowledge worker, right?
Yes.
Many companies, one of the companies, or my current company, if you think about it, right? So we have a huge frontline workers.
Yeah.
They never use laptop and desktops, right? At best, they use handhelds.
Yes.
Right? Or maybe none. But even they need experience. Well, if they don't use IT, they may not need IT experience, but they do use other services.
Facilities, HR, and what have you.
Exactly.
These other services,
they do use facilities, they do use HR, they do use procurement and whatnot, right? So that's the really next wave, and that's probably the bigger and the most prominent wave which is in the industry today, is to have end-to-end service experience, right? Make this whole world connected to bring the delightful experience at work, not just from IT standpoint, but HR, procurement, legal, sales, supply, whatnot, right?
Yes.
So that's what the enterprise service management solves for. And if you really get there, then I think the next big wave I could think of is, we call it the voice of customers, for example, right? So in this case, there's no customer, but there are employees, there are end users, right? So think about it. If you can segregate employees by personas and have feedback coming straight from them, right? And let me explain this a little bit. Users have a different need, but stakeholders have a different need altogether, right? If you talk about some financial system or some collaboration tool with a finance analyst versus a CFO, they would have a very different need.
Yes.
And guess what? Both of them are using, let's say, Zoom, but they have a different needs from Zoom, right? The angle they look at your services, your tools, your technology is very different from a CFO standpoint versus an employee standpoint versus a contractor standpoint versus a very fresh college grad standpoint versus a person who has spent 20 years in a big company, right? So how do we personify these employees and get their experience and their voice straight to service providers like IT services or HR services and procurement and so forth, right? That's I think that's a nirvana. That's a ultimate level of experience management. And I'm a thinker, right? I want to think really, really long term. And I was thinking, what could go after that? What else can you fix in the whole gamut of experience management? And the only thing I can think about is, if you reach that level of sophistication within your company, and if you're an ultra large company, well, that's a nirvana. But then that's the time to get up and do the same thing for your customers, for your partners, for your consumers, right? Because you have fixed everything for your employees. Your employees are probably the happiest in your company, both the knowledge workers and the frontline. This is the time to bring same consistent experience for your partners who work with your company, your consumers who consume your products, your customers who take bulk orders and stuff like that, right? So,
because there is, yeah, and I agree with you. It's a great way of sort of saying spread the love, so to speak. It's almost when you get, there's obviously lots of people saying happy employees, happy customers. That's clearly a very common phrase.
Exactly.
It's interesting where you go next with it, because it's there's so much to do, and trying to keep them happy in all walks of life, and then the cultural differences as well. Different countries have different expectations. Individuals in countries have different expectations. So it's a bit of a minefield, but yeah, you've got to try, right? You've got to do something, I think, is the key message. If you do nothing will change, right? So absolutely with you on that one.
Yeah. And then a few things we could talk about as well, the adoption, right? So many initiatives me and my team have taken in many of my previous roles, previous companies, right? One thing stand out consistently is the adoption, right? You can bring a great tool backed by great processes, and obviously you have people so enthusiastic to drive the change. But if the adoption doesn't happen, if the change doesn't stick, well, you don't really exploit the whole value. You don't really achieve that outcome you're intending for, right? And that's where I thought it would be interesting to kind of put together some examples. How do we drive the needle on adoption, right? So we are a huge promoter of transparency, right? Whatever we do, let's say we have experience data, we have some SLA data, we disseminate that through live screens to very prominent locations. Like, for example, if you have a tech bar, that's a great place to put that. You know, how we are doing in terms of experience. Place where your C-circle sits. That's a prominent place to put that. And anywhere and everywhere where your employees have a more footfall, right?
Yes.
We also do provide gentle nudge to people to increase the response rate, right? So think about you are on the Teams 24/7 or whenever you are at work, and you get a little nudge saying, "Hey, how's your experience last time you talked to our chatbot?" You know, it's a nicer way to kind of get a response right there. And then there's another practice we started at one of the companies is hug at work, right? And in that company, we used Happy Signals, for example, and we call it Happy Signals User Group at work.
Yes.
Essentially, it's driving the hugs at work. More people can hug each other, or really more people can understand Happy Signals, the features, and drive the experience for their apps they support, their end user services they support, their infrastructure they support, right? And that creates a big community of champions, adoption champions, right? Then we also have something called happiest region or happiest sector of the month or for the quarter, right? And we really reward them, recognize them socially that, hey, you were able to keep up your region happiest. You had the highest net promoter score, lowest time wasted, and all of that, right? And many such things, right? I can keep talking about. We have whole time messaging curated, where when you are holding on a live service desk engineer, you don't need to get bored with the music. In between, we can tell you that, hey, this is what we do for experience and appreciate your response.
Okay, so there's this promotion of give us feedback because it helps. It will help you. It helps us. Yeah,
exactly. And we do it in a similar way as you said. We heard last time you said this, and this is what we have done, and we would love to see your next feedback. Right. So it's not just a promotion, but telling you that you said this, and I take it to heart, and I fix it for you, and hence I request your next feedback so I can have something more to fix. Right.
Yeah.
Then we do something called Happiness Day, celebrating the Happiness Day, right? It's like really bringing the awareness that, listen, this is what we are behind. This is our culture. That's where we're trying to get to. Come around, have some snack, play around some games. And by the way, we'll tell you about how do you do experience management, right? So we do it by various regions, and that had been a huge hit. And another important thing we do is, so we know from ITIL, the SIP, Service Improvement Plans, well, we tossed a new word, kind of XIPs, Experience Improvement Plans. Right?
Yes.
Well, services can still have their way to improve, like application you talked about, right? Application improvement cannot happen right away because they are on legacy infrastructure stack. But you can still increase the experience. So we have a way to tackle the experience improvements plans across teams and across regions and across partners and so on. So these are some of the practices that worked for me, that worked for my teams, and we were able to really drive the culture of experience management in IT and in non-IT. And I think adopting some or all of them would really give a jump start to any large or ultra large companies.
And it allows it to stick as well, doesn't it? Because how often do we have? You've asked me for my feedback. You've done nothing with it. You've told me nothing at all about what's getting better. It comes back to, we said earlier, communication. It's all about communication at the end of the day, or a lot of this is communication. So I think it's it's a wonderful story you've got there, and obviously lots going on in your current organization, and you've done a lot in other organizations, and I think it's absolutely wonderful. And I think it's going to be interesting. Those companies that don't adopt this approach, what do we think the future looks like for them?
Well, they will be tied back to ITIL. Well, don't get me wrong, I love ITIL. It's just that I don't think they have an option, right? So either you are adopting early or you're adopting late, but I think everybody and anybody is adopting, right? Because humans and their lives and their experiences have the utmost value, right? And that fundamental will never change, right? as a great employer, what you could do is you could help them improve their experience. If you want, somebody else will, right?
Exactly. And do you, I mean, historically, the days of the past where people hang around in companies for 15, 20, 30, 40 years, I think from what I'm seeing, certainly people are more likely to walk nowadays. They like to say, I'm done with this because actually life's too important and too short to be worried about, you know, how long my issues are not being dealt in, right? So I think I agree with you that those days have kind of gone, and people will just leave. You know, I've left companies through poor, not just IT, lots of reasons, but IT experience being a fundamental part of it.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't expect some like the Gen Zs to turn up fresh from university, whatever, and give them a system that's older than them. That they click a button and wait for 3 hours or 2 hours for a response from it. I just think those days are kind of going, if not gone, gone. So it's a very interesting time at the moment.
Right, fully agreed.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Prashant. That was a great session. I've really enjoyed hearing your story, and thank you.
Well, always nice to be here and lovely chat. Thanks, Mark.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Hi all, and big welcome to Doug Rabold. Great to have you in this session, and I'm very, very willing to learn from you how you see XLAs and how you see the situation in US regarding to experience management XLAs. But first, please introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, thanks, Sammy. I appreciate you having me. I appreciate the folks at Happy Signals for inviting me to present and have a conversation with you. I'm Doug Rabold. I've been in the experience management field for I can either say 5 years or I could say a lifetime. And the reason I say that is about 16 years ago, I moved from a prior sales career in financial sales and services, completely different industry. But I moved from that into IT service management and operations. But I've always sort of translated what made me successful in sales into the way that I approach IT service management and ops. And that is, I found in my long sales career that people buy things for two reasons. Either they buy things to avoid the pain that they're experiencing today, or they buy things to approach some pleasure in the future. It's one of two reasons. And the key to successful sales is finding what that impetus is behind a buying signal and ultimately helping them solve it and not necessarily selling a product, but selling a solution. What I did when I moved into IT operations is I really sort of translated that approach and took that solutioning mentality into service management, and it served very well. I think my timing was right because that's a decade or so ago is really when experience really started to, assert itself in a sense in the service management world. And so having that skill set translated very well. And really that's been how I've modeled my career in service management for the last 10 years or 16 years, if you will. But I say half jokingly, I moved into a CX role 5 years ago, but really my whole career has been in customer experience and really focusing in on how do we deliver a positive experience.
And I know that you are enjoying what you are doing, and you kind of are one of the people that are talking about experience a lot on XLAs. But if you have to kind of very summarize it, that why you are happy in this role and doing this.
What's my happy signals?
What is your happy signals in the area? What makes you kind of loving it?
It's very interesting because while I did well in IT operations, I'm not an operational type guy. And by that, what I mean is steady state. I know there's a place for it, but it's not really my place. I love going in and finding things really on a consultative basis, if you will. Finding what ails a situation, or what can we do to optimize a situation, or ultimately what can we do to maximize, and really looking at it consultatively, putting the things in order, and then moving on to the next issue and turning over the steady state to someone else. So I think really when I talk about customer experience and when I talk about really experience management as a whole, that's what a lot of it is there's a piece for steady state, but I like going in and being the solver. So that's really, it's funny because I'm finding my energy coming up just as you asked that question. Those are the things that really get me going is how do I identify and how do we take it to the next level? So
what is the meaningful problem to solve for the customer end users? I think that is the very well said. I think that is the core for experience management, really, that we are solving things that matter.
Absolutely.
Not because some technology is saying something. But hey, we're talking today about XLAs. So let's start from that and go a bit deeper in that area. And then later on in this discussion, let's go to kind of how to start stuff and so on. But how would you define XLAs? It's still quite a new thing. So it's always good to start from the definition even.
Yeah, so that's a great question, Sammy. And I think if you ask, I think we're probably at that stage that if you ask 10 people, you're probably going to get 8 different answers.
Most likely.
I think that's one of the challenges right now. It's both a positive and a negative challenge. The negative is there's sort of a lack of standard and a lack of uniformity. The positive is that means there's a lot of discussion going on and a lot of excitement around this. And I think until we reach sort of a consensus, there's going to be this energy going on around what XLAs are and how you define them. I think in my mind, the simplest explanation of what an XLA is a measure of outcomes, where traditionally in the world that we inhabit in IT service management operations, it's been about outputs. So as opposed to looking at just those things that measure how often, how many, how frequently, sort of those productivity measures, if you will, which are the traditional SLAs. This is, how do people feel about the service you've provided? And there's been a lot of discussion around the watermelon metric, and things that the SLAs are all green. So why am I getting tapped on the shoulder about hey, you guys are not providing the type of service I expect? Well, that's because we're measuring the wrong things. So XLA allows us to measure those right things that make a difference.
Yeah, it's a quite often when I'm talking about exactly the output and outcome is I do agree heavily on that one. But also when I have been thinking about this, what these SLAs and XLAs really mean from the leadership perspective, I'm starting to kind of understand that SLAs in a way are management tool, because by setting those up, you are telling to the organization what to do and what is okay. But with XLAs and making the experience and maybe efficiency as the key targets, you are telling to the organization what is important. So they can do their decisions to make sure that the experience goes up and efficiency goes up. So it's in that way I see it, it's a different tool. And I think many of the people that are thinking about this, there is and still 5 years ago I said that I hated SLAs. I said that you have to drop to use them. It just doesn't work. It is, and some of them really are against good experience. Not all of them for sure. And you have to understand how you are working and how the IT is working. But XLAs is really like what we try to achieve. So what is the outcome of our services and not the output?
Yeah. And you touched on an excellent point as well, Sammy. And that is, while by definition, if you look at the definition of SLA, it's negotiated is one of the first words. But the reality is that they're very infrequently negotiated. Usually it's IT telling the business, this is what I can deliver, take it or leave it. And there's very little negotiation. There's very little back and forth. Whereas when you talk about XLA, obviously there's this collaborative spirit that really you have to work together to identify what is important, what delivers business value. And then you need to have representation that goes across. And it's very different. An SLA gets put in place and it's usually not revisited for years, if ever at all. XLA by definition has to evolve over time. And, traditionally an XLA isn't going to be in place for, more than 9 to 18 months. Whereas these SLAs, it's years and years and years without change. So
and I think traditional ITs I have seen many times that SLAs are set, like the average is set. Let's say you have certain answering time in a phone and solving time for ticket, and that is exactly the same for all tickets. But then when you talk to business, there are tickets that they would like to prioritize heavily, and some others that they don't even care if it takes 2 weeks. And if IT doesn't understand that priority and thinking that everything can be solved in this time and that should be okay, and then we are not understanding what the business is needing. And I think that is the kind of the traditional SLAs. Sometimes they are set not only that they are set for too long time, but they think that the average is okay. And that is not the case, because IT has to really prioritize things on the base of end users.
It's funny too that you bring that up, and I'm going to use a term here that I hope this flies with you, but an unhappy signal that we picked up, which IT picked up 1 year ago, but I don't think we ever extended it to the point that you've just described. Is that sort of the VIP service. And so you had the C-suite and senior directors and above who always got this white glove service, and they had different SLAs in place for them. Well, it's like, why would we do that for the C-suite, but we wouldn't do that for those who are really paying the bills? I mean, let's face it, the C-suite, God love them because they're our sponsors, but they're costing the company significant money. Why would we not extend that sort of service to those revenue producers or revenue generators that ultimately, pay the bills?
Yeah. Well, let's say finance industry. You have people that are face to face with the end customers of the organization, and they are using certain tools in that context to the customers. That should be prioritized. That the tools that they're using in that situation, they have half an hour with the customer, that they can really deliver good service, because that will influence the whole reputation of that whole organization and the customer service. So I do agree, it's not the YAP. I don't think that is the right, but understanding what is important in certain roles. But now, I know that you have been talking a lot about XLAs in different industry events, and you are doing that, and you have been using the term about what XLAs are not. So what they are not from your perspective?
So there's a lot of things that they're not. Yeah. And I'll touch on just a few, but, in total, when I look at it, and I've already sort of alluded to this, that I the way that I sort of define them is in contrast to what we're accustomed to, which is SLAs. But, there's several things that I circle back on when it comes to what they're not. And one of the things that again, I've already touched on this, they're not permanent. When we talk about SLAs, usually they're contractual. They're written into some document somewhere, and they're contractual. So in essence, they live on forever until renegotiated or until thrown out. XLAs, by contrast, should focus in on those things that, and to coin a term or to reuse a term, those wildly important goals. So just a few things, and that's another difference. SLAs usually have this laundry list of SLAs, 20, 30, 40 SLAs, which, let's face it, nobody's going to meet 20, 30, or 40 SLAs all the time. And so it's sort of a setup for failure. XLAs, by contrast, you should really just focus in on probably 3 to 5 things at a time based on prioritization. And that prioritization should be what's important to our organization for the next 6, 12, 18 months. Yeah. And let's focus in on those things, and let's build an XLA that's going to help us drive and deliver against those expectations. Another key difference, and this is sort of where the prioritization comes in too, SLAs by their very nature are fairly standard, not just across competitors within the same industry or sector, but really across most organizations as a whole. If you go and you talk about handle time, there's sort of this expectation for technical, it's 15 minutes or less. For non-technical, it's 8 minutes or less. And you've got all these other SLAs. You've got FCR percentage, which usually you're shooting around 80% or something like that. But there's sort of these standard ranges. And that's because everybody sort of has this base foundation on where they start from and where they want to be in order to provide the level of service that's expected. XLAs, by contrast, what may be important to my organization today, you may be a direct competitor of mine, but it may not be important to you. It may not deliver the experiential outcomes that your organization wants, but mine does. Or we may have the same experiential objectives in the same time frame, but one is I'm starting from a lower level of maturity than you are. So from a prioritization perspective, it's not as important to you as it is to me. And so there's this subjectivity that comes in, and I know everybody in the C-suite hates the term subjectivity because that's a soft squidgy, But the reality is that when it comes to experience, we don't all start from the same place, and we don't all expect the same outcomes. Again, it's that difference between outcomes and outputs. So, I think those are some of the key differences. There's plenty of others. One of the things that I hear a lot when I'm out working with clients is, what's somebody else doing? What's my competitor doing? I kind of go back to, it doesn't matter what they're doing. What's important to you? What's important to your users? What's important to your employees? And what's important to your customers? And that's where we need to start from, is identifying what those are, where you're at, and what's going to move the needle the most.
Yeah, and I think that is kind of the very near to the kind of process we typically recommend to our customers, that first start to measure, start to understand what are the experiences. And then, like in a half a year, 1 year, start to really set the XLAs. Because then you have the understanding that, hey, this is how it works. These are things, and those are the things in our organization that need to be the priority. So it kind of, yes, you can measure happiness and productivity for all services, but then you have to select the fights that you're having, which are the core focus areas, what you are focusing on. And let me give kind of an easy example on this one. Let's say there is a merge of 2 organizations, and the other one bought a company that is 10 of their size. For sure, they should be prioritizing understanding the new people and really understanding to get them, because they are forcing them to change their way of working, to understand how that experience goes. And that should be the IT mindset. Okay, let's a bit prioritize of that understanding for the next 6 months. And then we are back in the whole normal situation maybe. And that's why it's not like, you have to select your focus areas when it comes to the experience. And that I agree that XLAs shouldn't be like years and years the same. And also what we are talking in later on today with Sakari, we are going to talk about the benchmark report. And we are going to talk about the industries and some country differences and US compared to the rest of the world. And also in there, experience management and those levels where you are, it is not a competition. You can learn from the benchmark, but it is not a competition. If your employees are from Netherlands or Germany, the average score is like 60. If they are from Poland, which is just next to Germany, 85 is a good score. So there is a cultural thing where your employees are from that will influence scores. But what is important for me in the experience management and the XLAs is that you always improve. And finding the areas to improve the most, it will give you the focus area.
Right.
And that is the main thing. And I think, but how do you see when it comes to like outsourcing agreements and agreements where SLAs and XLAs are very much talked about? That what are the key things when it comes to that agreement side of life, when it comes to XLAs, that what is kind of your view in the, are we ready for that, or are companies doing that, or what is the key things to focus on?
Yeah, so it's very interesting you bring that up, Sammy. When I come across, well, let me actually edit that piece out. Let me start there again. So it's interesting that you bring that up, Sammy. When I go in and I start working with a client, one of the things I first ask for is let me see your SOW or your contract.
Yeah.
And one of the first things I do is a Control F to find out where the word experience comes up. And what's very interesting is I sometimes find that written into contracts are XLAs. And I don't mean just the existence of them. I mean actual XLAs. So what you've signed up for is really just a new SLA. If it's contractual, it's just an SLA by a different term. And usually when I find that, it was sort of sold as a less than robust XLA. Usually it's not well thought out. It's usually not tailored to that individual client's needs, wants, goals, and objectives. It's sort of a menu, if you will. And, we provided this menu of XLAs here, here's your menu. And so I think one of the keys is when it comes to that service provider, supplier approach, I think the existence of XLAs should be there, but what should really be included is how they're governed. So that's what should be contractual, that we will have XLAs, and this is how they'll be governed, whether that's an experience management office or a digital experience office, depending on how robust an engagement it's going to be. But that's what should be contractual, the existence of the XLAs, but not the XLAs in themselves, because again, echoing back to what I previously stated, these are usually ephemeral. They're usually not long-lived. They're usually 9 to 18 months. So what you do is you build in the governance structure that says, we will have 3 to 5 XLAs at all times, and they will be, including the fact that they'll be collaborative. And this is another key when you talk about that supplier and client relationship, is that the client has to understand that XLAs and experience management is not something the supplier delivers in the traditional sense, like with SLAs. This is something that has to be collaborative. They have to work together to build that build that sort of new experience, if you will. So I think that's what's key is finding the way that it's written shouldn't be what they are. It should be their existence and how they're governed.
Yeah. I do agree. I believe there can be kind of certain things that stay in a kind of as a way of measuring them, but what is the kind of target level? If you set that for 5 years, then you just limit your development. Right. But in a I do heavily agree that in the agreement, for me, very important stuff is that if you have to have SLAs, and if let's say your procurement or somebody forces you to use them, I don't recommend to use sanctions with SLAs when you have XLAs in use because they will overrun easily. But if you have to do those, then set them under XLAs. So if XLAs are remaining the same or going up, you don't care about the SLAs. You only care about the SLAs if XLAs experience is going down or you're not reaching the targets. But that has been something that we have recommended to customers and providers that have that there, because we have seen so many times that SLAs are kind of bothering XLAs. Hey, one thing I forgot to say, in my mind, one thing I want to say is that XLAs are not SLAs or SLAs are not XLAs, because that is sometimes what we see is that you take some of the traditional SLAs and name them XLAs. And that is just like, please. Some of them really help you to increase the experience of end users and the happiness of them. But if you try to kind of make up the traditional SLAs with a new term, then you might do badly wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, XLAs should supplement and complement SLAs.
Yeah.
In fact, in many cases, XLAs will take data inputs from existing SLAs and KPIs and sort of consolidate. And I hesitate to use the word index because then people think that it's just a numeric value that you output. But in a sense, what you're doing is you're consolidating existing data points. Mm-hmm. The difference is, and this is I think one of the key differences as well. And when I talk about what are some of the comparisons and contrasts, SLAs traditionally fall within a bucket. So for instance, you've got your level 1 service desk that has their SLAs. Then you've got your level 1.5 remote desk side support that has theirs. And then you've got level 2 and level 3. So each one has their own, and they're very compartmentalized or verticalized or siloed, if you will. But that's not the way the customer experiences it. That's not the way the user experiences. It's not the way the employee experiences. They experience very horizontally where it goes across. And so when you start talking about these things, you have to look at it from that perspective. Mm-hmm. Is how do I break down those silos and look at it from that customer standpoint, that it's end to end, not verticalized. Yeah.
That is very heavily. I do agree with that one, because it's and that even goes for the provider and your own team. XLAs are on top of that. The experience is a common target for both, which the collaboration, as we talked, is then much easier to achieve.
Yeah, and the XLA ideally should draw in data points from each of those silos in that end to end, and that's the way that you identify truly what that experience is.
Yeah. But hey, how about how you see the kind of maturity in US compared to the rest of the world? I think this is, of course, we are now a bit black and white in this kind of discussions, because there are different maturity levels in different organizations and different parts of US and so on. But you have been working in US, you know the status here in Europe. But what is your view?
Well, Americans always love to say that they're on top. Unfortunately, I don't think I can agree with it on this one. It's very interesting when I've been fortunate to have connected with you folks here at Happy Signals, as well as other organizations throughout Europe over the last several years. And what I've seen is that the European market seems to be several years ahead of the American market when it comes to this experience management aspect. As an example, I constructed my first portfolio of XLAs a year and a half or so ago, about 2 years ago now. But I recently spoke with a young lady in Amsterdam at an event that I was attending. And when I asked her, when she first developed and implemented her XLAs for the first time, she said 4 to 5 years ago. So I kind of did the math and worked my way backwards. And I said, well, that means I'm 3 years behind you. And I was one of the, I was an early adopter, if you will. I'm not going to say I was a pioneer, but I was an early adopter of the XLA methodology with the particular client I was working with. So it's very interesting. I also see a lot more vibrancy in the community in Europe. And I'm even seeing some of that vibrancy in Latin America, much more so than I am in the US market. I do see a lot of conversation. I don't see as much, I guess, in a sense, consolidation of that awareness. It's really at the awareness stage, I think, in the US. It's good that we're at the awareness stage, but it's kind of like what they say when you've got some sort of mental health issue or something like that. Awareness is the first step, but then how do you address it, right? Yeah. And I think that's what's key is in the American market, we need to start having much more energy around this, much more dialogue, and when I see the vibrancy that I'm seeing in Europe on this particular topic, I would love to help us be able to replicate that in the US.
Yeah, but I think I do agree, and there is. US has been starting this discussion a bit later, but what we have noticed is that in US, organizations tend to do a decision and move faster. When they do the decision, they do it a bit faster than organization average here, and they move faster. So when the decision is done, then they put all in, and then things happen. And that sometimes here is like the steps of happiness, or how we call them, start to measure, do first decision, and so on. That the speed of that change is a bit faster in US than it is. So I think it's hopefully with help of the others in there, we can get the XLAs moving faster and faster in US. And we are really now already, we're having a lot of customers in US, and that is growing, the biggest growing kind of area for us. And really excited about that change. But now, hey, let's start to summarize. But I think because this is a new thing in globally, but in US especially, I think it's good always to talk about what really is the benefits of experience management and XLAs, because that is you should be doing it if you are not aiming for good benefits of it. So of course, people are talking a lot about what is the return of investment, and that's, but from your perspective, what are the big things, big benefits?
So the biggest benefit, I honestly, I think when you talk about experience management, and I think this is one of the big challenges right now too. There's a challenge associated with this benefit. Most of what I'm seeing right now in the market is a push to euphemistically termed resource optimization, which really means automation and AI in lieu of warm bodies. And so that's the challenge part. And so it's really sort of this bottom line driven approach. Let's do as much with technology and tooling as we can, so that we can eliminate as many, frankly, the biggest drop to the bottom line is people. And so I think there's this bottom line approach that's a huge challenge right now. I think the biggest benefit, though, when you talk about experience management, is the top line element of it. And so when you start to deliver a better experience to your employees, to your users, to your customers, and you start to deliver better and better experience, ultimately there's this top line effect, which contributes to bottom line. And so I think that's probably, in a sense, I think there's both a challenge and a benefit there. And the true benefit is, or the challenge is, how do we make the C-suite understand that there's this benefit? And I think that's where it all comes in. But ultimately, I think our huge benefit is you build higher revenue. You build a sustainable business, and you can do it leaner than you may have done it in the past, but with better outcomes. And I think that really is the key benefits when it comes to experience management.
Yeah, and I think I also would maybe add that the traditionally when IT has been focused on the efficiency of IT. IT is quite efficient already, and now getting new tools to even create the more efficiency. But what we try to do quite often is that shifting that mindset to that, hey, the IT is there to help the rest of the organization make the money and be more efficient and happy. But are you measuring it?
Right.
Are you understanding how you make the end users more efficient? And that is really where the money comes from. So if IT can provide tools and make it easy for the end users, like in the ticket area, we are going to talk about this with Sakari later on today, but we are asking people per ticket, how much did they lose time? Of course, that is individual estimates, but on our global benchmark, which is more than 1 million feedback from the last 6 months that have said that, okay, how much time they lost because of that ticket. It is more than 3 hours per ticket. And that has a cost. But when you start to optimize the services, you can save that time. So it's less than, like we have customers that it's less than 1 hour on average per ticket. Yes, there are customers that start the journey and start from 8 hours per ticket, which means that when you start to understand where they are losing that time, you can optimize your services to help that saving for business. So they can really do what they're there for, not fight with IT services. And I think that is the big benefit from IT experience management. That is typically, you cannot really see that from the CIO's own budget, but you will feel it when you discuss about, hey, could we invest to this one? Because if you have done that several times and your organization is more efficient, then IT will also get more money.
Sure.
But I think that is exactly the kind of next 3, 4 years, 5 years, whatever it will take, that the whole AI stuff and optimization, that will come bigger and bigger. What we are believing is that in that situation, you should even more understand how your people feel about it, because otherwise you are going to crash to the wall, or I don't know what will happen if IT doesn't really understand how that feels. Because I think we all have had good and bad experiences from AI or chatbots. And if we are forcing people to use something without really focusing on the experience, that will be quite a bad situation in the end.
Yeah, that top line being the business value, right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the, it's interesting, we're sort of circling around this AI conversation now too, because I think one of the misperceptions or misconceptions in the C-suite, and you mentioned the CIO, and I think when the CIO hears about AI today, it's dollar signs, right? It's and it used to be a couple of years ago, it was the CIO saying, when we asked for a tool, the CIO dollar signs were about the cost of the tool. Today, I think the CIO is seeing the dollar signs about what can I save if I implement the tool, right? So I think one of the challenges is making the C-suite understand that these tools don't necessarily replace human bodies and human support personnel. What they do is they enhance and complement. And so where, as an example, when it comes to quality management, in the past, when QA team was doing quality review, they were reviewing anywhere from 5 to 10% of the interactions overall. Now, through technology, we can scale that to 90%, 100%. And then the QA team comes in and whatever gets flagged by the AI, they can go in and do a manual audit. And when I think about experience, it's sort of the same thing when it comes down to experience, and some of that comes through in quality analysis as well, is now we can do it at scale through tooling and technology, as opposed to just replacing bodies, because the tooling and technology doesn't necessarily tell us how somebody feels. There's sentiment analytics around it, but it's not always as robust as when you hear, when you put ears on that conversation. And as an example, I've had a sentiment analytics tool that picked up as a curse word something that wasn't a curse word, and it was simply because of an accent. So we need to look at how do we use the tooling and technology to enhance and supplement, complement, and scale what humans are doing today.
Yeah. I think that is quite near also what we are doing in our product, is that we are using AI to kind of give you hints that where you should maybe focus on.
Right.
We are not telling that you should be doing this, because we always know that, okay, in these 5 areas, we recommend you to go deeper and discuss with the people to get the full understanding. But AI is a great tool to help you kind of give you those hints, and then human brain still is much better to do that one-to-one discussion, group discussions to really, okay, this is really an issue that we have to fix, and that is behind it. So this is the thing what we change in IT. But hey, as I noticed, it's starting to be almost our product design now. So let's start to wrap it up for today. So I know that we will be both this year in November. We'll be in the HCI service management world. So if somebody wants to have a discussion with one of us or two of us in there, you will find us there. So let's see how many of the audience will be coming and taking us from the sleeves and to have a discussion. And of course, you can reach Doug. You can be reached from LinkedIn for sure.
LinkedIn for sure. My wife says I live on LinkedIn, so
very good. And me as well. You can find me from our web pages or LinkedIn. But hey, it was great to have you, and thank you for this. And for sure, we will continue the discussion later on.
Appreciate it, Sammy.
Happy Signals provides IT leaders and teams with full capabilities to bring every step of the IT experience management framework into your daily work. Measure experiences, share the data, identify improvements, and improve what matters most, all on one platform. Let's start with Measure. Start collecting experience data in days with Happy Signals ready-made surveys. Quantify end-user happiness and productivity, and understand why end users are unhappy or losing time. Get a continuous stream of real-time data about the experiences that end users are having across different areas, from IT services to enterprise applications and remote work, just to name a few. Share the data openly with your colleagues, partners, and business stakeholders to get everyone on the same page about the experiences end users are having. No more building manual reports. Save time by getting automated reports about different IT areas straight from the platform. Next, identify. Drill down into your data to identify where end users are unhappy or losing time. Looks like happiness is low for services in Germany, especially via email. But numbers don't tell the full story. Understand and tackle the most common reasons for poor experiences. Use AI-powered feedback summaries to instantly see what people are saying, saving your team hours from reading hundreds of open text feedback. Finally, improve. Create initiatives to improve the most critical areas for employee happiness and business outcomes. Track the impact of your actions before, during, and after change, and document key decisions and actions throughout your improvement journey. You can also make XLAs to follow experience level targets and ensure that your teams and partners are driven by metrics that put end users first. As you improve, celebrate your team's work and communicate what IT has achieved. Visualize long-term happiness improvements straight from the platform, and quantify productivity gains by showing how much work time IT is giving back to the business. With Happy Signals, create a common focus for IT around experience and bring more smiles and less time wasted for you and your end users.
I'm Katie Bates and I'm VP of Global Partnerships and Alliances here at Happy Signals. I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome Aimee Burnham.
Hello.
Aimee, please tell us who you are and where you're from.
Yeah, of course. So I'm currently the Global Director of the Digital Experience Centres for Computacenter. I'm quite new I'm only a few months into the role, which is always exciting. But essentially I look after all of the desks that we provide for our customers and internally at Computacenter.
Fantastic. So great start effectively, because I think you're talking about you're new into the organisation. Yes. However, I'm not going to let this one go. You were also a customer of Happy Signals as well in a previous life. So
I was indeed. I was so lucky. One day, one of the fabulous ladies that was running the desks in my previous role came up to me and put together a wee presentation and said, we really want to understand our sentiment more. We want to understand how we're benchmarking. We want to improve what we offer in our internal service desk. We found this organisation called Happy Signals. We'd like to trial it. What do you think? And she made such a fabulous pitch of it. I said, yeah, okay, let's try it out. And 3 months later, we had the most fabulous insights for the organisation, not just in terms of understanding the happiness of our colleagues. We also understood areas that we could make meaningful productivity gains. And for an organisation the size of which I was at previous, that was invaluable, absolutely invaluable. So yes, a big advocate for Happy Signals in terms of application and utilization in the business. It really helped me focus some of my strategy. And I love the fact that it was something that somebody in the desk that ran the desks came to me with and said, I've got something I'd like to bring to you. I mean, I considered myself very lucky that was the opportunity. Otherwise, I'm not sure I'd have found you guys just yet.
and there's nothing better, I suppose, from my perspective of being able to running the partnership ecosystem within Happy Signals to then hear that a customer then goes to our most strategic partner, Computacenter, and bringing all of that insight. I mean, Computacenter have been a partner of ours now for a little while, but I think you coming on board and being able to have first-hand experience from a customer view is so valuable. So, so within Computacenter, what's your specific role there? In terms of driving the experience agenda?
100%. So I wasn't actually long into the role that I was first introduced to Happy Signals as was a partner and moving to strategic partner for Computacenter. And it was lovely to see the excitement and the enthusiasm, but pragmatic excitement, pragmatic enthusiasm that people had within Computacenter about its applications for our customers and for ourselves.
So key principles of experience. I think we're talking around the core elements that really matter to Computacenter as an organisation and to their customers. Can you expand on that a little bit more as to what you believe are the most important aspects?
So for Computacenter, we are a business that works with people and we are formed of people. We do not develop a product or service ourselves. We are all about enabling our customers to change the world. And so understanding our people and understanding the people that we provide a service to is critical for the success of our organisation. And ultimately, therefore, experience for us is about registering a good baseline. Are we performing well? Are we performing against our peers in the way that we would expect to be doing so? Are we providing the service that our customers want from us? Because for me, obviously, looking after desks globally, I'm responsible for over 1.5 million colleagues for different organizations. I really need to understand that what we are doing and how we're moving our services forward is really hitting the mark. Because ultimately for me, understanding how experience plays in the day-to-day of enabling an organization is key. If you've got an engaged and productive workforce, I don't think anybody watching this interview would disagree that you're more likely, in fact, lots of studies show this, that you're more likely to have a productive workforce. You're more likely to make, a double-digit increase on your sales. You're likely to ensure that you resolve your challenges for the first time. You're less likely to experience attrition. You can retain the talent that you spent so long trying to attract. And so for me, it's a really full 360 perspective, a full look at the workspace and how we address that experience piece. And then you can really dial into it from a technology perspective into that business conversation. What are the financial gains that we can make as an organization? How does this make us more resilient as an organization? How are we ensuring that if you're in a regulated environment, that we're operating in a way that is not just ethical, but compliant as well? And I think you can really start to get a really rich understanding in each of those perspectives in a way that just having the different parts of asking questions, I don't think that you quite get to. This for me is really forming an ecosystem of understanding.
That's fantastic. So I'm going to pick up on something you just raised there around the cost side of things. And I think it's something that when we look at any organization, there always seems to be IT need to cut costs in business. And there is an impact to the employees within an organization, sometimes when that cost-cutting exercise happens, and the employees are ultimately the biggest asset of any organization. So within Computacenter and the offering that you're providing to your clients and where you've come from previously as well, I suppose it's really important to understand that employee journey whilst you're cutting costs and whilst you're defining what IT looks like and the value of IT. So how do you ensure, I suppose, within the services that you're delivering, that they're always at the hearts and minds of what you're doing?
Yeah, you touched on it, Katie. So the biggest cost to most organizations is their payroll, and not understanding how and if that big cost is being utilized correctly, are engaged in the right way of providing and developing the products and services. That for me would just be a huge blind spot, not understanding those things. But the value for IT is pretty simple, right? So I've spent over a decade now working in the technology world across financial services, across the energy sector, and now in the reseller space. And ultimately, for me, the value of IT is the underpinning enablement of the products and services virtually every business offers. It doesn't matter if you're financial services or your government or your energy or your retail. Essentially, every single part of your process will be underpinned by IT somewhere, whether that's in your manufacturing, whether that's in the endpoints, the laptops that your colleagues are using, whether that's your web front end that your customers are using. Understanding the people that create or design, create, build, run, and maintain all of those core elements are absolutely key, but also enabling your sales teams, your customer-facing teams, anybody that touches where you as a business generate your revenue. You need to ensure that the value proposition that sits behind that revenue generation is understood and is managed appropriately. So for me, it's about moving the conversation beyond IT's just a cost center, which was definitely things that I've had said before to me throughout my career. And it's more about saying that IT is an enablement capability, because we all know that some of the most successful organizations today really embed together that technology and that customer facing piece, and understanding how those teams are working together. The outcomes that they're driving are properly aligned to what you're trying to achieve strategically from a business perspective is hugely, hugely important. And that's not just how have you created an amazing office environment. That's also, are people set up correctly at home? Are people using the right applications on their devices to do their work effectively? Are you engaging with your workforce that might have accessibility needs? So for people that might have sight or hearing impairments, for example, for those that might have dyslexia or dyspraxia, how are we enabling them to bring their best selves to work in a way that really, really ensures that you're not always just throwing more money after something, right? You need to really get to that point of being a data-driven decision-making organization and understanding your people, not just your processes, not just your technology. Understanding your people is a key part of that.
When we talk about future of workplace, we know that you've embedded Happy Signals as part of a standard offering from your managed services perspective. And we'll touch on that a little bit more in a bit. But I suppose it's beyond just your managed services, isn't it? You've talked about other areas of business, but can you give an example, even if it was things like, where you look at performance-based refresh programs of how the experience data can really support that type of project that you're doing with your clients?
Yeah, I mean, so our clients and customers come to us with a variety of opportunities and challenges around their workspace. So again, there's a difference for me around in-country teams that may be spread geographically across, say, Germany or France or the UK. And how do you are you really promoting collaboration in a way that's meaningful? Can you look to target investment in specific offices rather than having the 10, 20, 30 offices that you've got across one country? And so it can really start to inform those types of decisions of, can we go down to 3 hubs? And are those hubs genuinely meaningful from that? Is it giving the experience? Is it connecting people in the way that we want? And so on and so forth. And then there are organizations that are global. And so they will have people working in not just a different geography, but a different time zone with different languages, with English perhaps being a second language or French being a second language, whatever your business chooses to transact in. And so there's a piece here as well around the way in which you're making those decisions, those investments, those strategic investments around your workplace. Are you really engaging with those that perhaps English is a second language? Are you getting the traction in those places as quickly as you are saying in your European operated parts of your business, or in the States, wherever that's being led from? And so there's almost an operational consideration into this for me. There's also an element as well around, we talk quite often in the technology space around agile delivery mechanisms, understanding the burn down and velocity of our backlog that has priorities and whether they're bringing value to the business. This is another metric point that you can input into that. And so rather than just looking at pure operational data to understand whether or not you're achieving what the purpose of a program is looking to do, you're getting rapid, not quite real time, well, you could have it real time, I suppose, but almost real time feedback about what you're doing, and adjust your programs accordingly. And it giving you that full position on where things go. And so for me, this also starts to reduce the cost of change. So if I roll back into early points in my career, I'd be creating these huge business cases that I'd be taking to cost boards, and there'd be multi-millions of pounds where you'd have an upfront and a run rate, and it would be, yes, the first 18 months, 2 years, we don't get any return on investment. And then after this is embedded, we start to do, or by the way, one of our biggest dependencies is adoption and change. And we know that 50% of the organization will really be engaged with this, but we've got a challenge with the other 50% of the organization because they're used to how things are being done. For me, that's not part of it anymore. Part of it is being able to have that iterative change points where you can do in the moment changes, which reduces that need to build huge business cases, but you can also start to target where you need that adoption and change capability as well. And so for me, Happy Signals can be applied in that local position or in that global perspective, regardless almost of what your organization is looking to achieve. You can look at what other industries are doing and going, are we performing in a way we expect to? And you can look at people that are operating in the same geographies as you and saying, oh yeah, we are facing similar challenges, or we do need to evolve X, Y, and Z because we're seeing achievements elsewhere that we're not experiencing. I think one of the beauties of having data is that it provokes you into asking more questions that get you to more nuanced outcomes that really mean you can focus your investment and the time that you want to make as a business. And where customer and colleague experience is the genuine differentiator in a world of commodities, why wouldn't you want to be on that train? It's super important.
Can you talk a little bit more about why you need propositions and why Happy Signals was, I'm going to say, the missing piece of the jigsaw, right? I think which comes up quite frequently within conversations.
100%. So as any technology leader or any technologist will know, the availability of SaaS, so software as a service, platform as a service, all as a service opportunities, and including generative AI, there are hundreds, if not thousands of opportunities. So how do you discern the wood through the trees? How are we able as an organization to provide clear guidance and direction for our customers in a way that's tried and tested and understood? Because you can go after all of them. Yeah. I'm sure many of us would know about what shadow IT will be. I think many of us are looking at how people are using generative AI and loving that people are adopting and wanting to try these technologies, but also thinking, okay, well, how do we manage it? How do we keep it secure? How are we looking after our data, et cetera, et cetera? So all of that thinking has really fed the decision by Computacenter to partner with amazing technology firms that are really thinking about and investing in the technologies of the future, whilst at the same time being able to support existing modes of operation, existing technology platforms. And that discerned the first three. That discerned our contact center platform, that discerned our kind of endpoint data aggregation platform, and it also discerned our ITSM platform. So that was our people and our processes covered. Sorry, our processes and our technology covered, but not our people, which is probably the really clear point to say here is Happy Signals brings in that people element for us to really understand that three-legged stool piece, or that three columns of strategy, to say we're investing in and making a lot of time into our processes and our technology, but is it really landing with our people? And this is questions that our customers would come to. Like I said earlier, lots of people are asking, or knowing what they want the outcome to be, they don't necessarily know how to do it. And so for us, it became, almost a fait accompli in the sense of picking Happy Signals to be that fourth strand and really fill in that ability. Happy Signals for each of those different technology platforms is complementary. It works in partnership with. It's an addition to, but a core component of what we already offer. It isn't necessarily repetition of what else is in those platforms, which is amazing. That's one of the other things that, as a CIO or a technology leader, you're trying to work through. If you've got a Venn diagram of technology, there's quite a lot of overlaps, and the question is that okay, or do you need something that sits out of there? So, for us, Happy Signals was just the logical decision point that why wouldn't we work with an organization that has lived and breathed, focusing on how people are feeling, that sentiment, that experience, that application of decisions. Why wouldn't we work with why wouldn't we work with a company that puts that at the heart of their customer proposition? It's just makes sense.
Perfect. Last question from me, and I think probably one of the most important on the journey is, we talk about embedded. So it's not a value add proposition from a Computacenter point of view. It's embedded into your standard services. But as part of that, you have wrapped a complete XMO service around what you're providing to your clients, which sometimes the adoption of experience is really the challenge within customers. How do we really take it forward? How do we look at the data? How do we analyze? How do we make the right decisions? So can you just talk a little bit about your XMO service offering and the importance of that?
So this isn't my brainchild. This is what happens when you join a company and they're already thinking about this, right? You get to enjoy the fruit of the labors of others. And it's really kind of involved my own thinking as well, which is probably how I would talk to those that are watching today, is that one of the things that you can sometimes see when you're adding in a managed service proposition is there's always another bit more to spend, another bit more to spend, another bit more to spend. And again, coming in and adding a new capability to an organization, you look at the total cost to run something. So you don't just look at the license cost, you also look at the people it takes to run it and how you're going to extract value. And what's absolutely fabulous about what Computacenter has done is said, well, we absolutely know that the value in this, in Happy Signals as a capability is the value you can discern from it. And so if you sell somebody a license and then add in that XMO capability on top, you've only really given them half of the capability. And so we would both have customers sat there going, well, lovely, I've spent this money, but how am I really getting out from it everything that I can see that the platform can do? For a long time, there's been digital experience management capability, and XMO capability is an opportunity for us to be able to share with our customers a kind of center of excellence capability that really has an understanding about what types of questions do you need to ask? How are you going to best get the outcomes from it? How does this work with other technology platforms that you've invested as an organization? But it also means that because we have so many customers, we can bring in that agnostic view across industry, across different geographies, across levels of appetite around risk, and so on and so on and so forth. And so for us, it just felt like a really simple and logical thing to do, was to just embed it. The value that we would bring would be greater than trying to keep it as a separate cost piece, because we benefit from it as an organization and our customers benefit from it as well. It's one of those things for me where the effort to pivot a little bit in terms of our existing capability far outweighed any cost of that tiny pivot. Creating an add-on would always be an inhibitor, and we just feel it's so important that we didn't want to put that hurdle in the way for our customers to use this platform in the best way possible. And it also means that if people choose to come and work with us to do the managed service proposition, which of course we would be delighted to have, there's some assurance, right, that not only are we working with the best in the global industry, that is Happy Signals, we've also invested in developing our capability internally so that our customers don't need to make that additional investment themselves. And I'd have loved that in my previous role. Would have made my life much easier. So yeah, it's super excited. I love the fact that we do it. I love the insights that the team are bringing out. It's just a great part of the journey that we're going on and will continue to go on.
That's superb. Aimee, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Katie.
Thank you so much. And look forward to what's to come.
Yeah, 100%. Very excited.
Thank you.
Hi again. Welcome to this session where we are talking about global IT benchmark and the findings that we have learned from our customers. I'm joined by Sakari Kyrö, who really is the expert on this area. So welcome, Sakari.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. This is one of our favorite topics. And as Sami mentioned, my name is Sakari Kyrö, and I'm one of the co-authors of this benchmark. And while Sami might want to downplay his own role, it is really a collaboration between the two of us.
Yeah, I think this is the thing what we love to do the most. But typically we do have, Sakari, like 45 minutes to go to findings, but now we have 15. So let's deep dive to this one so that you get an overall understanding of what this is. And we will direct you in the end of this presentation. That way you can find the whole report. But let's just start so that you get the understanding of what we are talking about.
Absolutely. All right, let's crack on.
Yeah. So when we really talk about this global IT benchmark, what this really is, it is a collection of information coming from all our customers. So all our customers are contributing to this benchmark report. So this is their employees' answers to all our surveys that we are having. And that all contributes to this report. On the right side here, you can see the industries that are part of this report. So it is quite, you can see that it's quite equally all big industries that are contributing to this report. And now when we are listening to this one, remember that these are the companies that are focused on experience management. So they already have done some improvement and so on. So in a way, it is where you can get with good IT experience management practices. But here, just a reminder, we are always measuring happiness and productivity of end users. And Sakari will open on the next slide that what is the kind of overall happiness to those certain measurement areas that we have in the product. Please, Sakari.
All right. So when we look at the overall IT experience across our different measurement areas, it is always fascinating to see how the contact points where people are interacting with IT people or they are remotely working are the ones that are highest rated. And collaboration with IT and incident resolutions and request fulfillment, a lot of people would think that those would be the lowest rated among the IT touchpoints, but actually they are the highest ones. And the ones that are the lowest rated are the technical touchpoints such as mobile devices, laptops, and enterprise applications. But this is an interesting understanding, not only from the point of view of the happiness piece, but also where people lose time. And in the following slides, as we go through the deck today, we will see some interesting findings about where those differences and where the significant points for this presentation today will be.
Yeah, and as you can notice on this slide, these results are based on almost 2 million feedback. So even though this is just people telling how they feel about IT, I think these start to be kind of factual things because of the whole so huge amount of people responding to these surveys.
Yeah, and it's when we look at these scores, when we think about an incident or a request, you can see an NPS style score plus 79 on average for all of our customers across the globe in 130 countries that score their services. And that's a very, very good score. And we request is plus 84. But what is interesting to look at this perception of lost time with incidents and requests. And when we speak about this is not the mean time to resolve or the time that the ticket is open, but this is really the end user's perception of how much time they lost. And understanding that time lost will also allow IT to understand business impact from a different point of view than they usually are able to understand from their traditional IT metrics.
Yeah, and so we are quite often asked that, what then, when you understand how happy people are to certain services and what is the business case behind it. But the real business case is in understanding that lost time. So where we can make the end users more efficient. And here you can see a kind of an easy calculation, meaning that on average, every ticket is causing a bit more than 3 hours lost time in your business side. And if we use $50 per hour as a kind of a calculation base here, that ends up that the cost of that ticket on the business side is 163 euros. Sorry, dollars. But that means that if you think about the cost that IT had in solving this ticket, most likely that is much, much less than the part that business is losing. Even though this might sound to you that the kind of focus on the lost time as a very, very negative thing, kind of it is. But then when we start to say after half a year that how much time we have been able to save and give back to business, it starts to be a really positive thing to report to the business. But this gives you the understanding that what are really the business priorities that should be used in IT. Let's say we are going to go through some benchmarks here about channels and so on, and which channels work the best, the most efficient for people. But on the other hand, it also gives you priority on which kind of services, for example, should be prioritized in service desk. But let's not try to go to too details because we only have that 15 minutes. But there is a business case of doing experience management. That was my main point on this slide.
All right. What about channel distribution and how these our happiness and lost time differs across different channels where tickets are submitted?
So I think this has been one of the most used slides from the benchmark for years already. So I think we have published this benchmark now 11 times or 10 times. I don't know exactly remember which one was it, but several times again. And this has been always part of the report. And this is now IT incidents. IT requests would have a different story, and you can read that from the report. But when looking at IT incidents, you can see here that the portal is the one that people are liking the least. And they are even losing more time in there per ticket than if they would be using email. So still the situation with many portals is that it's looking good. It is on the company brand, but maybe the process behind the scenes is not working well for the end users. So we kind of, as an IT, we make our end users categorize tickets and give us additional information, but that is not really directing the process behind the scenes. So it's not really helping to save time for the end users. It is maybe helping us save time in IT, but it's just transferring the work from IT to portal. But I have to say there are good cases, and some of our customers are having really efficient portals also from the perspective of end users. But that just underlines that you have to be very, very good in designing those portals in a way that they speak the language of the end users and they are not speaking the language of IT. But again, this is one of the slides that we could talk about like in half an hour, but maybe Sakari, we just move on and you can read more of these in the wider report.
Let's do that. So when we look at the happiness and what makes an end user satisfied with services, and when we look at across all the different benchmark reports, we have seen that there are certain rules of thumb that are applicable when it comes to understanding how you can make your end users happy when it comes to solving tickets. And one of them is that speed of service is universally impactful. Below here, when you look at the percentages, you can see above these boxes that in our benchmark data, 86% of the feedback is positive. So people are generally very happy with the IT organizations that use experience data to run their service desks. And speed of service is the highest rated point or the most selected factor or experience indicator when people give a high score, a positive score. But it is also very highly up on the list when it comes to the neutral tickets and the second highest one when it comes to negative tickets. So speed of service is something that is universally impactful. When people are happy, it's quite likely that speed of service was an indicating factor or a contributing factor rather. But also if they give a low score, it is quite likely that speed of service probably was not so good. But then another aspect that is important to see here is that negative feedback is often about processes. So it's about my ticket wasn't solved. I had to explain my case several times. It was difficult to know where to start. Those are things that have nothing to do particularly with maybe the agent solving the case, But then when we look at the positive feedback, often the aspects that are called out as being contributing to the positive experience is service personnel's attitude and service personnel skills. So positive feedback is often about people, negative feedback is often about the process, but speed is the one thing that is universally impactful across the whole lot of answers. But then when we look at how people rate services and understanding that there are differences between different locations, this has always been a fascinating slide to look at, and understanding that there are cultural differences in how people rate IT experiences. And we know that Western Europe is the most difficult to please, the most demanding group of IT end users. And when we compare it, for example, to North America and South America, we can see an interesting thing here. Maybe you want to cover that, Sami.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing here is that even though the lost time in both North America and South America is higher than in Europe, still employees are rating the services higher on average than the employees in Europe. In the report, there is also country level information on the same thing, and there are differences, but the theme is very clear that Western Europe, for some reason, is much more critical than other parts of the world. And that's a fascinating thing in a way to understand. If you are a global organization, you have to kind of understand this, because there are countries where average is like 60, and then there are countries where the happiness score is 90. And it doesn't mean that you would be doing things better in the countries where the services are rated 90. It is that people are more likely to give positive feedback than they are willing to give critical feedback. I think that is very heavily the behind the scenes what is causing this. But again, in the report, you can also find response rates per country, which might be some interesting fact for some of you.
It is, and it really gives IT a possibility to understand the relative to the cultural and locational patterns, if they are already doing a good job or if they're just hitting their head against the wall because it's a location where good scores are really hard to get.
Yeah, but here maybe, Sakari, I would like to kind of underline that. Now remember, even though we are now going through the benchmark, our point is not to kind of challenge you this as a competition. No, the experience management is done to find the areas where you could be doing your services better, to help the end users to be more efficient and be happier in their work. So this is not like a benchmark competition or competition against the benchmark, but it gives you the understanding what is normal so that you can focus on those areas that can really be improved.
Very good point. All right, let's go to the next slide then and look at a little bit more narrow than global country level and regional level happiness, and look at the happiness across industries. What do you see in this graph here, Sami?
Yeah, I think this is one of the most asked things from us, that, hey, what is the industry benchmark? We only have had this now like 2 times in the report. The reason being that the previous slide has even bigger influence on the scores of an individual organization, because it matters where your employees are coming from. So if you are a bank from Germany or you are a bank from Poland, the score difference is more than 20. But there are differences also in industry. So if we now focus on the finance industry here and then the technology part, there is a big, like 27 points difference there. And that is caused, maybe if Sakari move to the next slide, one big thing behind this is that it's not maybe so much about the industry itself. It is about what kind of employees you have in that industry. So finance industry, you have a lot of people that are not so technical. And if you compare that to why the technical organizations are the most demanding, so Sakari, if you move to the next slide, you can see that in those companies, there is much more people in so-called profile doer, which means that these are people that are technically skillful. And these guys have tried to solve problems on their own before conducting service desk. So on average, tickets that are sent to service desk in these organizations are more complicated because they have handled the easy cases on their own. So there is really like a good reason behind why it is much harder to make employees in these organizations happy than it is in some other industries. But Sakari, anything you want to add on this one?
Maybe just the fact that these doers, prioritizers, supported and triers, you might wonder, where does the data come from? And we have also on our website a guide to the support profiles that go into the vectors that define these. And they are based on real end user answers on what are their preferences in getting IT issues solved, and what is their competence and confidence in solving IT issues themselves. But there is a full report about this as well, and it will give you much more information about what these profiles could mean in practice for you in your organization as well.
Yeah. So Sakari, I feel that this 15 minutes is too short because we are referring to the report all the time. But that's okay today. All right, let's move on.
Yeah.
Then we start to summarize what really is this is also a benchmark, but benchmark on what kind of benefits our customers have gotten from doing IT experience management. And I think the first one there on top, the happier end users, is quite obvious. So 90% is almost of our customers are saying that, hey, they have reached that. They have more happy end users. But I would focus your thoughts now on the next three, because those are about how it feels in IT to focus on experience management. So you get your employees, your team, yourself more motivated because you are now creating value that can be measured. And then you do better decisions in IT, and you can then show that to your customers, the business units and the end users that, hey, we have improved. That is much more rewarding than it is to make sure that you close 10 tickets per day or 10 tickets per hour, however that is in your case. But you really are working on the things that matter for your end users. And that gives you better motivation. And that is what we love in what we do, is in fact making IT people happier. Even though when they are happier, they are making the normal employees of the organization happy. But I think that was, Sakari, all we can do today in these 15 minutes. But it was great to have you on this presentation, and maybe one more reminder. Read the report. And
yes,
if you have any
absolutely.
questions, ask me or Sakari, and of course we can join to any of the kind of, if you want to discuss this one-to-one, or if you want us to present to your organization, we are more than happy to do that. Just contact us and we can help you to talk about the experience of end users.
Absolutely. We're happy to do that anytime. So just reach out on LinkedIn or otherwise, and let's have a chat.
All right. Hopefully you are all still there. It's been quite a long day and nice sessions. Thank you again for all our speakers and guests. It's so amazing to get people to talk about this topic that we are so passionate about.
Yeah, and it was so clear from all the presenters how passionate about this area they are. Yeah. And I think that is the thing that motivates us very, very much.
Yeah. But hey, maybe to end the session, to think about for the listeners to start thinking where they are today and maybe how to get started. So we kind of divide it into four things, like we talked in the first session as well, that the data and tooling, do you have experience data? Are you asking from the end users and the employees how they feel about things? I think that's the first thing.
And are you doing that on continuous basis? Yes. Because if you do it on a bi-yearly or yearly, it's such a snapshot.
Exactly, because it's otherwise if you do it yearly, it's like looking at the weather today, putting some clothes on and going for the rest of the year with the same clothes. Yeah. And we all know how that would end up. So especially in Finland, when it's, we have 4 seasons. So, but yeah, that's really the key, that to have a continuous thing, and you can start whatever way. Then of course, in a large enterprise, when you need to do it in scale, then of course, a good solution will help on that. But then I think the next key thing is to think about the ways of working.
Yeah.
Just having a tech and a tool in place doesn't really,
make sure that you do the right decision and do decisions. So I think in that area, you will find from our webpage some information about the ITXM framework, which is our collection of what we have learned in the last 10 years from our customers. And we realized that it's good to write that kind of as an instructions.
Yeah.
But you will find concrete tips on how to do stuff in the experience management area.
So really the ITXM framework is our way of talking about the ways of working. So we have the framework that you mentioned. We also have some best practices, how to run a monthly meeting, how to handle good and bad feedback, and all these kind of practical things, because I know that IT people are very doers and practical people. They just, you give them an example and then they can go and implement. But if they would try to, during their hectic day, try to invent a new thing, how to roll that out. So that's why we kind of gathered these freely available resources.
Yeah, and that's
kind
of I think okay, this is not a sales seminar, but in our tool, we have ready-made surveys just to make it easy to implement it. And the same thinking here, we try to make it easy for IT people to start their journey by giving the best practices. Of course, you guys are doing changes for that to optimize it and make it work in your organization, but you don't have to start from scratch.
Yeah. And there's also a certification program. And I think the cool thing with the certification program is to get your colleagues and your team to talk the same language.
Yeah.
It's a short thing. It's about 20 minutes to look some of the sessions that our team has created. And then there's a short certification exam at the end. So if you want to get a new badge to your LinkedIn profile and things like that, check that out. But then, of course, we get to these very topical things like experience level agreements.
Yeah.
And on the website, we have the practical guide to XLAs, but then you also created with Niall Keating from Bright Horse a kind of example how to create a contract out of XLAs.
Yeah, it's quite a long document, but I think that area is something that with Neil we see that many organizations are doing mistakes in the area, just confused with XLAs and SLAs and combining them in a wrong way. So we wrote that document with the background of also there, as Doc told today about what not to do.
Yeah.
In that document, we have a bit the same approach that, hey, these are the things that you should be avoiding, and these are the things that we recommend in doing in those agreements. But more than happy to have a chat about that if somebody wants to book a meeting and then chat about that area or any other things on this slide.
And then, of course, there's the return on investment topic that we all need to do when we are thinking about bringing in new things to the organization. So for that, we gathered all the experience and examples about productivity gains, how to justify this kind of investment to your CIO, to your CFO. So we have the IT Leaders Productivity Guide available, again, freely on the website. Don't need to put email addresses. You can read it from there. You can get the PDF if you want. But I think those are really good resources to get to learn more. But then if somebody wants to have also a conversation about this stuff, then they can just reach out through our website. They can just probably reach out to you, Sami, directly.
Yeah. Reach out to me in LinkedIn or however with email, sami.kallio@happysignals.com if you wish, because I love to have discussions with IT leaders globally to kind of share the understanding of what experience management means and what that is. And then if that goes well, then of course it might be that you end up to be a customer, but I love those discussions. So, and we learn from all IT leaders, gives us the understanding what people are thinking and what is challenging them and so on.
Yeah.
So and those are the things we talk a lot in our podcasts.
Yeah, exactly. And that maybe leads us to kind of the end of this ITXM Summit. So again, like you mentioned, if you want to listen more or watch more, you can go to our...
Have a day or two break after this one.
But I agree. We do have our IT Experience podcast available on your favorite podcast platform or also in the YouTube channel. So you can subscribe there, get informed, and it also includes a monthly newsletter where we gather all industry things, new things about XLAs, new things about productivity things, and so on.
I mean, that podcast is not only me and Pasi and Sakari that are talking there. There are customers and influencers that are telling their stories and their view to the experience management.
Yeah. And then, of course, all these sessions that you just watched, they are now available on demand right after we end this one. So you can, of course, please share those with your colleagues and whoever you feel that should listen to them. But probably on that note, exactly. Yeah. It was a pleasure to host this session, and please send us some feedback. So maybe we'll try to schedule the next ITXM Summit somewhere in the future as well.
Yeah, I think that is the case.
Yeah. So thank you. Enjoy your day and have a great experience management journey.